Good afternoon again, everyone, and welcome to round two. Sorry about those technical difficulties, but we will start from the beginning for this webinar on asset-based coaching using strengths and coaching strategies to assist consumers defining and reaching their vocational goals. So again, my name is Gerard, and I'm a trainer with the Career Connection Employment Resource Institute and Mental Health Association in New Jersey. Today we have Michelle Martin, who is a career development facilitator and instructor with over 20 years of experience in career and workforce development. And I just want to, get into the webinar. We'll try this again. Hopefully, we'll keep our fingers crossed. We won't have any technical difficulties this time. Some people, I did send out a new link. Hopefully, everyone got that through Eventbrite. Eventbrite wasn't even cooperating, it seemed, for a little bit of time. But anyway, I digress. Again, with the questions. At any time, if you do have questions, please send me an email through the email address CCERI training schedule. That's all one word. CCERI training schedule at gmail.com, and I could get those questions to Michelle. So we're going to try this again. It's a little after 3, and we'll, I guess, try to wrap it up around 4-ish if we can. And again, thank you for your patience, everyone, and hopefully we get through it. It will be archived, and we can, you can look at it again, or people who who want to take a stab at it and haven't been able to look at it can look at it through where it's archived, and we'll give you that information in the webinar. All right, Michelle, I want to introduce you again and say thank you for getting us back on track.
Yes, well, welcome to technology. One of the downsides of technology is it doesn't always work the way that we would like it to. So here we are for round 2. Okay. And we're starting over because we want to make sure that we can have a full recording for people who may be watching it later. So what I'm going to do is switch over to screen sharing so that I can start to walk us through the slides for the presentation. And as Gerard said, this is the asset-based coaching session, and we're doing, okay, I just want to make sure we're live on that. Okay, so it's asset-based coaching. As Gerard said, my name is Michelle Martin, and I have been in this work for almost 20 years, worked with a large number of agencies and organizations. So what's on our agenda for today? The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to talk about why we would want to do asset-based planning and coaching. We're going to talk about the benefits of focusing on assets and positive kinds of strategies. And we're also going to be talking about coaching and why coaching is so important. Related to that, we're going to be looking at the difference between what it means to be a coach and what it means to be a case manager, because I think a lot of times most of us are really functioning more as case managers rather than as coaches, and there are some big differences. Then we're going to talk about a coaching model that's called the G.R.O.W coaching model. It's been used successfully in a variety of contexts, and it is a model that I use for a lot of the work that I do with job seekers, both individually and in groups. And then finally, we're going to talk about some asset-based tools and strategies that you can try out in your own practice to start using more of an asset-based coaching model. Before we get into the meat of things, I do want to let you know that these slides, as well as the recorded webinar and some follow-up resources, will be available online for you to check out. You can find them, or you will be able to find them at www.michellemmartin.com/WFD. I will have those posted by the end of today or possibly tomorrow morning. So why should we be talking about being asset-based? What's the deal with being asset-based? I want to start with our brains and the way that our brains work. And one of the things that we know from recent brain research is that people's experiences and ongoing patterns of thinking literally wire their brains. They literally create neural connections that people return to again and again. Now, the other thing about brain research that we found, or through brain research that we found, is that people have what's called neural plasticity. That means that even if we have old wiring that has developed around certain patterns of thinking, we can actually create new patterns of wiring. We can create new connections in our brains. And so even if people have spent years focusing on challenges and what's wrong and all of that stuff, it is possible to, by changing how we interact and experiences and all of that, we can change people's connections. Really, in the end, what it means is that what we focus on in our experience and in our patterns of thinking, that's what grows in our brains. Types of brain thinking that are going on. One is our conscious verbal thinking brain. That's the logical brain. That's the brain that says, yes, I want to do this. Yes, I want to find a job. Yes, I want to network, and so forth. That's the conscious part of our brains. But then there's this other part of our brain that we can call the elephant, which is our more automatic, emotional, visceral brain. That's the part of our brain that we're not always aware of, that drives a lot of our emotions and our thinking. If we think of that part of ourselves as being an elephant's really hard to control. And so a lot of times what goes on is that there are all these kind of patterns of thinking that are going on behind the scenes that can be very negative, even if the writer, the more conscious brain, thinks that they're being positive. And so that's something to be aware of as we start to think about being asset-based, is a lot of what we're trying to do is kind of get into some of that emotional brain, some of that stuff that's going on behind the scenes. A third thing that I want to talk about in terms of thinking about why we need to be asset-based, and more specifically about the impact of negative thinking, is this notion of stereotype threat. There's been a lot of research into the idea that we have certain roles that we play in society and in our lives and in our communities. Some of them carry positive, negative, or positive stereotypes. Some of them carry negative stereotypes. So, for example, there's the stereotype that women are not very good at math. But what happens is if we activate negative stereotypes, that actually has a negative impact on performance. So if you remind women that they are women before they take a math test, they're likely to perform worse than if you did not give them that reminder. So one of the things for us to be thinking about is how often are we activating or reminding people about issues or aspects of themselves where they may carry negative stereotypes, and then how does that impact their thinking and their interactions and the actions that they take. So when we focus on challenges, when we focus on what's wrong, on barriers and all of that stuff, that has a tendency to increase frustration on the part of job seekers and the people who are working with them. It increases the sense of helplessness. There also tends to be more of a focus on what's wrong, which then tends to create in people a sense of shame. There's something wrong with me, and I feel badly about that. It also then feeds into a sense of social isolation. I'm different in a bad way, and so I can't connect to community. I can't connect to people around me who might be able to support me. The other thing about focusing on challenges is that it tends to decrease our ability to take action, in part because it decreases our sense of what are the possibilities and our sense of solutions. We tend to get very focused on just the problem, and we're not able to see bigger possibilities or bigger opportunities. And the last thing that it does when we focus on challenges is that it decreases our ability to learn. It puts us in a place where we are much less likely to be open to lessons and to what we could learn from our experiences because we're just really shut down. And so all of that negative thinking, all of the focus on negativity really actually works against us when we're trying to help people in the career and job search process. Now, on the other hand, when we focus on assets, what we find is that all of us, including our clients, when we feel like we're focused on strengths, we then see ourselves as whole, capable people. We don't just see what's messed up about us or what's a challenge about us. We see ourselves as being these whole, capable people. We're then able to see more opportunities, more of our own strengths, more of the times that we have succeeded when we've been faced with similar challenges. That also helps us access the positive emotions within ourselves and inspire us to take action. Most of the time, if we're feeling really negative, we just feel like hiding out. But if we see a sense of hope and possibilities, we're much more willing to take action. And then finally, a focus on assets really helps us start to be able to learn from experiences. We're more open to receiving feedback. We're more open to seeing experiences not as bad things that happen to us, but as opportunities to learn and change as we move forward. So before we get into the difference between coaching and case management, Gerard, I just want to check in with you and see if there are any questions or anything.
Not yet.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So let's move on to talking about the difference between coaching and case management. And most of us, I would argue, especially if we're working for certain, large agencies or organizations, we find that we are in more of a case management mode. And in a case management mode, the role of the case manager is to serve as an expert. They are someone who is a resource person. They are an instructor. They are in sort of a hero kind of mode. When we're talking about traditional case management, the goals of that experience essentially end up being, we get someone enrolled in a program and participating in a program. We help them find their barriers to employment, resolve their barriers to employment, and place them in employment. From a job seeker perspective, it ends up feeling very much like a process that is being done to them. And then in terms of strategies and the kinds of things that case managers tend to do, we are most likely having one-on-one meetings with job seekers or the people that we're working with. We are spending a lot of time giving people instructions to follow. This is how you, fill out this paperwork to enroll in the program. This is what you need to do to make sure that you can stay in the program. This is how you, access this resource and so forth. It's very instructional and very focused on programs. Coaching, on the other hand, is different. It starts from a premise that the coach is not the expert, but instead their role is to be a facilitator and a partner in the person's job search and career process. So that means rather than having a lot of answers, we are asking more questions. And when we are interacting with people, we're trying to help them clarify what are they looking for, what skills do they need, what resources do they need, and so forth. The goals for coaching are different. Here we're looking to find out what are a person's strengths, what are their assets, and how can we build on them? What skills do they need to develop, and how can we coach them? How can we give them feedback to help them develop those skills? Who needs to be on their team to support them as they're going through a process, and how do we help them create that team so that they're more likely to be successful? The strategies that we use, there is still one-on-one coaching that occurs, but we also start looking at can we do group coaching? How can we have people working together in community with other people who are going through the same process and having the same experiences so they can share and work with each other? There's much more of a focus on dialogue and asking questions and getting people having more of a give and take and a back and forth. And we're really trying to help customers see where am I having challenges, or what strategies do I need to work on and strengthen in myself, and how can I make sure that those things are happening. This is all going to start to really fall into place more, I think, in a few minutes when we get into the G.R.O.W coaching model. One of the things that I see happening a lot in terms of being in that case manager role is that we really are positioning ourselves as the hero of the situation. We come in, we're rescuing that job seeker, we're taking care of that job seeker, we know where the answers are, and they just need to listen to us and follow our instructions, and everything is going to go well. I get that. I know why we do that. For a lot of us, that's why, you know, we're attracted to this profession in the first place. We like helping people. But that being in that hero kind of place ends up taking away a lot of power and action from the job seekers. And so we have to be conscious of, you know, how are we trying to act too much of a hero as opposed to having the job seeker rescue themselves or be the hero for themselves. Another way to think about this idea of the difference between case management and coaching is to think about it in terms of looking at the expectations that we have and the support that we provide. And so I see in particular two ways of interacting with job seekers at different times. Sometimes what we have is high expectations for people's behavior of all these things they're supposed to be able to accomplish, but minimal support in actually accomplishing that. Maybe we send them to a couple of workshops and then say, hey, you know, get out there and be successful. But that's not the kind of support that people need. And so they end up feeling like things are being done to them. The other thing that I see, and this is probably more often that I see this, is that we set very low expectations, and we're providing all the support. We're essentially doing everything for our job seekers. And that is a different kind of case management dynamic that goes on that can be just as damaging and difficult for job seekers and for us, because it really, you know, it puts everything on us to get things accomplished. So what we want to be looking at is how do we help people set appropriate expectations that are high expectations for what they're going to be able to achieve, and be able to provide them with the right kinds of support to achieve that. And that's what coaching is all about, is really helping people think about what expectations do I want to set for myself, what help do I need, what support do I need to achieve those expectations. The typical feel of a case management appointment, usually it is one-on-one, as I mentioned. Often what you'll see is that the case manager is doing most of the talking, and they're also doing most of the note-taking. You basically see a person sitting in a chair collecting a bunch of brochures and forms that maybe they have to fill out, and the job seeker or the case manager is giving them a lot of instructions and everything else. There tends to be more of an emphasis on talking about what are your barriers, how do we deal with your barriers, what instructions do I need to follow from the case manager, what organizational paperwork do I need to get done. You know, it's much more of a focus on those kinds of activities in the interaction. Often there's more telling than asking or listening, and in the end it really ends up being more organization-centered rather than person-centered. And by that I mean that whatever reason we have for the meeting with the person and whatever's going on in that meeting, usually it's about what do I need to accomplish to achieve organizational goals. So do I need to document that this person has been engaged in job search? That's an organizational goal. Do I need to make sure this person gets enrolled in XYZ? Often that ends up being more of an organizational role or organizational goal. So when we're in that case management mode, we're really thinking about, well, what needs to get done in order for us to achieve our outcomes. The typical feel of a coaching appointment is different. You are going to go through a more structured coaching process, which we'll get to in a second, but there are clear steps in that coaching process that walk people through setting goals, thinking about feedback, and so forth. There's much more, the staff person is doing much more asking of questions, providing feedback on what happened, and making suggestions, following the lead of the job seeker. You're really kind of trying to pull information from the job seeker as opposed to you doing all the talking. The job seeker is the one who's leading the discussion and taking most of the notes. You're building from strengths as your main point. You're starting from what is working. And there's much more of a focus on developing career planning and management skills, helping the job seeker develop the right kinds of skills to be able to manage all of this for themselves. When you are able to move into that coaching mode, there are huge benefits. The job seeker feels more empowered. They see themselves more as an expert in their own lives, as opposed to, again, feeling like they're following the instructions of some process that they only dimly understand. They own their own plans, and they're much more likely to have come back the next week and say, I did X, Y, and Z, because they really own those plans and actions. They have a greater sense of self-efficacy and self-esteem. They feel much more independent in what they're doing, and they really start to, you see as time goes along, that they're developing skills such that by the end of your meetings with them, they really don't need you to go through the career and job search process. And then finally, when we focus on coaching, part of what happens is that people build their own support networks that go beyond you as a staff person, you as a professional staff person. They've really thought about, how do I create a whole network of people who I can turn to for support in this career and job search process. So before we talk about getting started, again, I want to take a quick break and see if there are any questions.
No questions, Michelle. Again,
Okay.
if anyone has any questions, CCERI training schedule, all one word, at gmail.com. Okay.
All right. So let's talk about how you get started with this whole process. And I think there's, first of all, some important things to consider. First of all, the first thing is, how do we build trust and rapport with a customer? Not just when they first come in, but also over time. Frequently, when we're first meeting with customers, we're asking some really, probing questions about their lives, about their experiences, asking them to give all this documentation and so forth. So we really need to pay attention to, how do we build up a trusting relationship with them so that they're more likely to feel comfortable talking with us about the kinds of things that they need to discuss in order to make their plans and move ahead. Another thing that we want to think about is, how do we create an environment that feels more like we are partners in a process, and for that matter, how we are basically there as supports to help the person we're working with achieve their goals. How do we set things up so that it feels like it's more of a partnership and a co-creation thing? Another thing we have to think about, and this again is where some of the models and tools we're going to be talking about come into play, how do we structure our conversations and activities so that we are being more of a coach as opposed to being a case manager? And those are things we have to pay attention to in all of what we're doing. One of the big things I think we have to pay attention to is, how are we hosting the space? And by hosting the space, I mean, how are we, one, what's the physical space that we're creating for people when they come in to meet with us, or for that matter, when we go meet with them, but also, what is the spiritual, well, maybe not spiritual, the emotional space that we're creating? Do people feel like we are very present to their problems and to their issues, or are we kind of, pulled in 50 directions at once and we're distracted and everything else? That makes a huge difference. People want to feel like, at that moment at least, they're who is the most important person that you're talking to. So how do you make sure that you're present, that you're, really focused on them? How do you physically arrange this space? If you have somebody sitting on the opposite side of a desk from you, that puts a barrier between you and the other person. Is that really what you want to create in a coaching environment, where what you're trying to do is partially help people feel like they're connected to you, and that, again, you're in partnership? If I have a desk between us, I'm not going to feel like a partner. I'm going to feel like, maybe I'm in trouble or something. We also have to pay attention to how we greet our job seekers. How do we, invite them into the space, make them feel welcome, and that kind of thing. And also, how do we go about doing what, I call the soft startup? One of the things that has been really helpful for me, both when I meet with groups as well as when I even do some one-on-one stuff, is I do a 3-minute free write when we first get together. And what that means is, for the first 3 minutes, we take out scratch paper, and just do a free write, whatever's on your mind. What are you worried about? You know, I'm late getting to this appointment. I'm feeling stressed. I'm anxious. I don't know what's going to happen in this, you know, and you just write for 3 minutes. When it's over, you throw that paper away, and that is sort of a way for you to be able to get rid of whatever, you know, was on your mind before you came in here, so you can be more focused and you can be able to move into more problem solving and coaching, and that can be really valuable for helping people get started. Another thing that we need to do when we're first getting started is really talk about expectations. Thinking about, you know, what is the customer's role in this process and what is your role in this process. I'm going to share a sample agreement with you, which can be really helpful in spelling out, you know, roles and responsibilities. But I think it's important to have job seekers understanding certainly how you envision yourself interacting with them, but you also need to understand what are they envisioning. What do they think your role is? And that way you're able to correct any misperceptions they have or whatever. You also need to think about what are your responsibilities and what is the customer responsible for. So again, having a conversation about, you know, these are things that I can do for you and that I will be responsible for doing. What do you feel like you need to be responsible for? What are you going to be responsible for? You also want to set expectations about what the process is going to be. So what's the overall plan for your series of meetings or interactions with them? But then also what happens in each meeting. And this is where I'm going to suggest, if you are using a coaching approach, that you would explain to them, this is the structure, this is how each session together is going to work. These are the steps that we're going to work through. And then from all of that, you can develop an agreement and really spell out, I'm responsible for this, you're responsible for this, how do we want to work together? And I find it helpful to put that stuff in writing, not because you're trying to, you know, catch someone or blame someone or whatever, but that can be a really positive experience to feel like, oh, okay, we met, we understand how we want to work together, what we need from each other, and that can set a positive standard for moving forward. So in a typical coaching session, what you'll be doing, and this is where we're going to get into G.R.O.W in a second, is you're going to review customer progress. What have they accomplished since the last time you got together? What have you accomplished on their behalf since the last time you spoke? You're going to talk about the goal or the goals for the session, and I'll explain more about that in a second. Then in your session, you're working on that goal, maybe by asking certain kinds of questions. Maybe there's an exercise or an activity you want to work through. But whatever you're doing that in support of achieving that goal. You'll reflect on insights. So what have you learned in that coaching process? What are the important takeaways? And then helping the job seeker develop their action plan. All right, we worked on this goal today. What is it that we're going to do for the next time? What do you want to work on in between? What steps do you want to take? What's the time frame? And so forth. So before we get into the G.R.O.W model, I'll just take a quick check-in. Any questions, Gerard?
Not yet.
Okay.
I'll be coming now.
So let's talk about the actual G.R.O.W coaching model. And this G.R.O.W stands for goal, that is, what does the person want, what is it they're looking for, what are they trying to achieve. Often there are multiple goals. Usually with the customers we're working with, the goal will be, I want to get a job. But there's a whole lot of work that needs to go into setting goals around that. The second step in G.R.O.W is the reality. So what's happening now in your life around that goal? What have you done so far? What experiences are you having? What steps have you taken? What problems are you encountering? The third step in G.R.O.W is options. And this is where we talk about, well, what could you do? What could you do to, you know, if you want to find a job, what could you do? I could fill out, 10 more applications a week. I could go to a networking meeting. So it's a brainstorming kind of experience. And then the last step in it is will. So based on all of these options, what will you do? And by will, we also mean what are you willing to do? Because a lot of times what we leave it with people is we'll list a whole bunch of options. Oh, well, I could do this, I could do this, I could do this, I could do this. But when you really get down to discussing it, there are just certain things that they're not going to do. And so they have to be willing to say, these are things I am willing to do, and this is what I can commit to for the next time that we get together. So GROW is goal, reality, options, and will, and that's kind of the basic structure of any coaching meeting that you would be having with people. So when we're looking at goals and we're helping people to define their goals and what it is they're looking for, we are starting to ask some different kinds of questions. So a good first question to ask when you're first meeting with someone is, what would you like to accomplish in our work together? We're going to be working together. What is it that you would like to accomplish in this time frame together? You can also use that question, what would you like to accomplish, at the beginning of each session. What would you like to work on this time? Where do you need help with something? As part of thinking about goals, good questions to ask are also what's important to you in this. So why is that goal important to you? What is it that it will bring to you? And also, what would success look like to you? So having job seekers really, so for example, when we talk with them, they'll say the goal is, I want to get a job. Okay, well, what would success look like to you in getting a job? That's how you start to find out, well, they want a job that pays a certain amount of money, that is in a certain industry or occupation, and all of that kind of stuff. So that becomes a way to have a better understanding of what that person's goals are, what it is they're looking for. Also in the goal setting, you're going to be thinking about what are visible signs of having achieved that goal. So how will you know that you achieved that goal? What will be different in your life when you've achieved that goal? How will you know that the problem is solved? A lot of times when you start to get into work with people, it will be, I'm sending out resumes and I'm not getting any responses back from employers, and I'd like to work on getting more responses back from employers. Okay, so how will you know that that problem is solved? Might be a good question to ask someone. And a person can say, well, I would know that that problem was solved if I was getting, 5 more responses per week, or 5 more responses per month, or whatever. But it really helps people start to narrow in on what is it, again, what does success look like for them? What would it look like if the problem were fixed? So some good questions for helping people kind of think through the reality. What is their current reality in relationship to their goals? What's happening now with that? You've been applying for jobs. What's happening now? What's been occurring over the last 3 months, let's say? Another question to ask is, what's the result of that? You tried this. What happened as a result? Who else is involved in that? How are they involved in that? How are you feeling about all of this? So you're really helping people to kind of take a look at the reality of their current situation, again, by asking questions and helping them kind of get more deeply into clarifying what's going on. Then when you move to the options stage, you're helping people explore potential options. You start with questions. You don't immediately start with advice. So in regard to this problem or in regard to this goal, what have you tried so far? What else could you do? Have you dealt with something similar before? Could we borrow from that now? Then if through questions you weren't able to get to answers, or if you have suggestions that you want to make, then you can say things like, have you tried this? Or something that has worked for other people in your situation is this. Or what do you think about trying this? Or can we build on something you said earlier and try this? Or I'd like to try something with you if you're okay with it. So as you start to have people think about options, first it's about asking questions to get them generating their own list of options, and then you make suggestions, but you do it in a way where they're clearly suggestions, where you're not telling people you must do this or you should do that or whatever. The last stage in G.R.O.W is the will stage, and that's where you're helping a customer commit to specific action. So they've talked about the goal, they've talked about what the reality of their current situation is, they've talked about some different options. Now they're going to talk about what specific action am I going to commit to moving forward. So here you can say, now that we've discussed your goals and some options, which of these do you want to try? Or how will this action help you achieve your goal? Or what steps do you need to take on this before our next meeting? Or what's one small thing you could do to move this forward? You want to close each coaching session with the person clearly stating, this is what I commit to doing. These are the actions that I commit to taking to resolve this issue or to move closer to this goal or whatever by the time we meet again. The will stage is one of the most important stages of the coaching process, but I find that it's the one that we tend not to spend a lot of time on. And so you really want to focus on what are people willing to commit to. Now, related to that, you also are probably going to want to ask about, do you have any fears or concerns about this action? A lot of times when people say that they're going to commit to something, you can tell they're kind of waffling. And so you want to help them think about, what are their concerns? Where do they think something might not work, so that they're able to address those things. So here's some tips for implementing G.R.O.W. One is understand that the goals, reality, and option steps are not linear. In fact, they tend to be kind of circular, and you're moving in and out of them. Always end with the will step. As I said, what can the customer agree to do? Even if it's not what you want them to do. Maybe you're thinking, my God, that's a tiny, tiny step. But if they take that tiny, tiny step, that's important, and that's something that you can focus on in the next meeting with them. Focus on asking questions and using effective listening techniques to help them clarify what they're thinking, help them clarify what it is they want to do so they get a better understanding of themselves. Really watch your impulse to tell the person what to do. That I find is the #1 challenge in being a coach. I experience it all the time. I want to tell you the right answer, quote unquote. But it really has to come from that person. And then you also need to use silence so that you're able to leave space for people to do some thinking. Now, there's some slides in here, some steps in here for building on G.R.O.W. Because of time, I'm going to kind of just skip over those so we can get into some different tips and techniques. You'll be able to see those slides in the, on the website, and so you can see all of that information there. But I want to just quickly move into some coaching tools and strategies that you can think about using, and that we've included links to on the website. So the first thing I want to encourage you to think about is, how can you use vision boards? And vision boards are, you can have small boards that can be like small pieces of cardboard or poster board, or you can have huge ones. But people are cutting pictures out of magazines and words and everything else out of magazines. Sometimes they're using their own photos, sometimes they're drawing. But it's a visual way for people to express themselves and explore some of what they want to achieve, and what goals they want to achieve, and so forth. It can be, for a lot of people, it's the process itself is really helpful because it helps them get clarity, but it's also very inspirational to them. They can hang that on the wall and remind themselves, during tough times, these are the things that I really want to focus on. Here are some different vision board prompts that you can use with people. What's my ideal life? What's my ideal career? What are my greatest strengths and what am I really good at? What are the roles in my life and what's important to me about those roles? Anything really that gets people kind of being more inspired and more focused on their vision for themselves and for their careers and who they are can be a good vision board prompt. Another tool or another thing that you can use is inspirational interviewing. And by that, I mean that we're asking some different kinds of questions. So for example, instead of asking what's wrong, we can ask what's working and has worked in the past that we could build on. If somebody is having a challenge or a barrier, well, what opportunities do we see here? What are some different things that we could try out that you haven't tried out before? Here are some questions for a positive future, where you are, again, instead of interviewing people about their, challenges, ask them, not what do you want less of in your life, but what do you want more of in your life? Or if success were absolutely guaranteed, what risks would you take? What would a perfect job look like? What do people always come to you for? Just the act of asking those questions and having people think of themselves differently and really start to dig into themselves in some different ways can create really powerful inspiration, and it can also help people feel better about themselves. Here's some more positive planning questions. Think of a similar situation you handled well. What made it a success, and how can we bring that learning to this situation is a really good one. How is your life getting better, and how can we bring more of that into your experience? Most people, no matter how bad things are, in their life, there's some aspect of life that seems to be working pretty well. And so how can they turn to that? How can they use that to make things more positive for themselves? Another thing that we can use are agreements. I mentioned this previously when we were talking about setting expectations in a coaching experience. And this is an example of a making progress agreement. And it's something that you could use to document what will happen in between individual sessions. So it says, today I promise to take a big step forward to improve my life. Between now and our next meeting, I will, and the person would write down what are the things that they're going to work on, or what are they going to do. These actions will help me accomplish my goal of, and that helps people see how what action they take may be connected to achieving their goals. The benefits to me of doing this will be, and that's where they will have thought about and listed the benefits. My career coach agrees to do X, and that's where you put in whatever you're going to do to help the person achieve their goals. My career team can help by doing Y, and that's where any other people who may be involved in the person's life, you can put down, what the job seeker is going to ask of them or how they're going to involve them. And then it says, we agree to work together to make this important step as successful as possible. And then you can have both people sign and date it. That's just one example, but having those kinds of positive agreements can help people really document, see where they need to move forward, and take action in between meetings. Another thing to share with people, what I do with the job seekers that I coach is I have them set weekly job search goals. And I have them set goals in several different areas. They set goals in networking, that is expanding their networks of people that they know and deepening their connections to the people in their network. Researching target companies, finding job leads. They set goals in personal branding, and then they set some kind of goals in personal or professional development so that they're continuing to grow. Now, a goal is something like, we'll apply for 10 jobs by, Friday. We get people to be as specific as possible in, setting their goals. When they set their goals, then they use that to come up with their daily job search plan. So from their weekly goals list, they would suggest, or they would pick a couple of goals from their list that they're going to work on. So if I said, I'm going to apply for 10 jobs, by the end of this week, that means one of my goals for today.
Hello? Are you there, Michelle? Looks like we've got that same problem again.
Evaluate progress. I use a checking my job search progress kind of worksheet that breaks it down into, if you're not getting interviews, have you done these things? And if you're getting interviews but not getting job offers, have you done these things? As coaches, part of what we people need to do is help people understand what are the kinds of steps you have to take to achieve your goals. And if you're not achieving your goals, you need to go back and look at, am I taking all the steps that I need to take? Now, there may be other things that are interfering with why a person isn't achieving their goals. But certainly one place to start is by really looking at how much are you actually doing, are you taking the right kinds of actions? And so providing people with some kind of structure for evaluating their progress and understanding what kinds of actions they're taking is really important. Another tool to use with people is journaling. I have people do a job search journal where they will go through and look at how much time did I spend on my job search? Then they think about, well, today I worked on these things. I feel I made progress in these areas. What I learned today that I can take with me into tomorrow, and they can list some things there. What worked well today that I can do more of tomorrow, then they can list some things there. And then writing down any feelings they had today and how they worked with them. In particular, in the whole career and job search process, that can be really frustrating. And I find that it's helpful if people, can say, like, today was really frustrating. I felt like I got nowhere. And the way that I dealt with it is that I went and worked out for, 30 minutes, or I called a friend up, or whatever. Part of the reason that journaling can be really effective is that people are motivated if they feel like they're making progress, if they can look and see I'm taking action and it's starting to, some things are moving in my life. And journaling can become a way for people to really document and think about that as they move forward. And that also can show them where they may need to get some more coaching, where they may need to work on some things, or some, I hate networking, I feel so uncomfortable having to go up to somebody at a networking event, and a goal I want to set for myself is to get more comfortable with that, so that the next networking event I go to, I meet 5 new people. Another thing related to journaling is people can ask or respond to one question. What one thing can I do today, no matter how small, to move me in the direction of getting to, this goal? That sometimes is, where people are at. They need, like, having one little small movement that they're taking, and this can help them kind of think about that and take action on that. I'm going to stop here before I get into the framing piece, Gerard, and just see, are there any questions? I know we're getting close to the end here.
I don't see any. I guess it's you're doing such a good job that people don't have questions.
Oh, is that it? All right, so let's talk about another strategy, which is what we would call reframing. A lot of times what we see, what we have to understand is people have experiences, but there's a story that they tell about those experiences that then drives all of their actions and their activities. So really there's no quote-unquote objective reality. It's just this story that people tell about their experiences. I love this cartoon because it's an example of that. Somebody, we're both looking at, these guys are both looking at the word broken, and one sees broken and the other one sees just okay, because, in their mind it's not broken. So that's what we're really talking about, is you can look at the same thing but see, frame it differently. So when we're working with job seekers, we have to help them, one, understand what's the story I'm telling myself about this. For example, a lot of times, the story will be, this is a challenge. A big one is, this shouldn't be happening. I see that a lot. They don't specifically use those words, but when they start getting into stories about how the job market didn't used to be like this, and, it's not fair, and I'm older, or whatever, the issues might be, they're stuck in a story that this shouldn't be happening to them. But part of our goal then is helping people look at, well, what's the story you're currently telling yourself about your situation, and what's a new story that you could tell yourself that would help you take more positive action, that would help you move forward. Because obviously this story of being stuck isn't working for you. What's a new story? And so some of the ways that we can help people reframe their situations or think differently about themselves is, okay, here's a situation. I don't like it. I'm not happy about it. But what can I learn from being in this situation? Another one is, who do I know who has handled this situation, and what could I learn from him or her? So it might be that, you know, I can't see a way out of this situation, but other people have handled it. What did they do? How could I learn from that? Another thing to look at, or another type of reframing question is, how will my life be better after I've worked through this? So rather than focusing on how sucky my life is right now, you can be thinking about, well, once this is solved, because eventually something's going to happen, something's going to move, how will my life be better? Another question, what are my greatest strengths and how can I use them to help me work through this? A lot of times that's a huge mover. It might be that it's somebody who really does have a lot of friends, you know, but they have not used their friends in ways that they could to help them move forward. And so maybe connecting to friends would be a way to help them move into a new situation. So the idea of reframing is really about helping people to shift their attention from the current, you know, kind of bad story they're telling themselves into a different story or a different way of coming at that story. Another tool to use is to create group coaching. And I've been doing a lot of this and calling them, really thinking of them as career mastermind groups. But the idea is that we form groups of job seekers. We form groups of people who have similar career goals, and then those groups are primarily facilitated and led by the members, but you can have staff or some other person who can help provide structure and information and everything else. And the focus in those groups is similar to what is the focus of an individual coaching appointment. You're talking about, these are my goals for the week, this is the progress I've made, these are problem areas that I need to troubleshoot. Sometimes what comes up is a lot of just-in-time learning. Somebody says, for example, a problem they've been having with filling out an online application, and other people say, yeah, I've been having the same problem, and then you can, you know, do a quickie little lesson on how to deal with that problem. There are a lot of benefits to group coaching. It increases people's probability of achieving goals, partly because they're working with other people who are working on similar goals, and so that can increase that sense of, you know, hey, we can all do this. There's a distribution of obstacles. There's this, if we're all facing similar obstacles, the load doesn't feel so heavy. It doesn't feel like it's just me or it's just about me, and so it feels like there are more people to help me bear that weight. You clearly can benefit from multiple perspectives. I can't tell you how many groups I've been in where somebody else in the group, not me, I've been the leader of the group, quote unquote, or the facilitator, but other people will say, have you tried this, or this worked for me, or what about doing this, or I heard about this resource. You really benefit from being in that group coaching environment where people can hear it from other people. Obviously, there's resource sharing. There's a lot of diffusion of stress. So if you're in a one-on-one situation, you're bearing the full brunt of the job seeker's stress and anxiety. Because they're, you know, kind of coming in and dumping it on you and wanting you to solve the problem. But when you are working in effective groups, then more people are able to kind of share and feel that, and it doesn't feel, again, as heavy or as weighted. It also can accelerate motivation because what you have is people checking in on each other and saying, you can do it, and like, I'm so impressed by how you handled this. It really helps people feel much better about themselves and gives them the kind of support and so forth that they need to be more motivated. If you're going to do group coaching, a few tips. You need to understand that coaching is not the same as training. It is much more about doing. It is much more about, these are the actions that I took, these were the results of those actions, I need some feedback and some help in these areas, this is what I plan to do next week. It's really more action-focused. You want to help job seekers own the discussion. The biggest challenge I find in facilitating group coaching situations is that people will still tend to turn to me as an expert, or they'll direct things to me. They'll send me information and say, can you share this with the group? You really want to diffuse that back out so that people feel more ownership of the group. So you're helping job seekers own the discussion. What problems or issues do they want to work on? Not just what do you want to work on, but what do they feel are their challenges? Again, encourage them to engage with each other. A lot of times they will still turn to the facilitator, but you really want them talking to each other, responding to each other's questions, giving each other feedback. Watch for coachable kind of aha moments and call attention to them within the group. A lot of times as people are talking, they will, say or do something that gives you an opportunity to give some feedback, or to say, oh, do you see how so-and-so, how they approach this situation? How could you use that same approach in your own job search? That becomes really powerful learning for people. You need to help them stay on a track. You can get off into some black hole discussions, believe me. And then the last thing I would say is that at the end of any group coaching session, just like you would in an individual coaching session, you need to help people finish with an action. I will do X, Y, Z, this coming week. I commit to doing, A, B, C this coming week. The more we can focus on action, the more we can focus on people making public commitments to action, the better, because that means they're more likely to actually take the action. So here are some kind of including some next steps for you, and some ideas for how you can take this information and maybe move forward with it. One is, I would suggest observing yourself in your interactions. One of the most powerful things, I think, can be to really watch yourself in your interactions with your job seeker customers. How are you acting like a case manager, and how are you acting as a coach? A lot of times you're being a quote-unquote case manager because you're really trying to achieve some organizational objectives, and being a case manager is an efficient way to do that. But that isn't necessarily always the most effective way to do that. So really kind of take a look at, how am I being a case manager, how am I being a coach, and how might I want to play around with that. Also, another thought is for you to look at, all the things that we've talked about in here, and look at the follow-up resources as well. What is one strategy you can experiment with? What is one action that you could take to try out with individual customers or with a group of customers or whatever? Try talking with your colleagues. How could you work together to try out some of these strategies? Maybe you try one and a colleague tries another and somebody else tries a third, and then you guys compare notes. And then finally, what are your assets and strengths, and how can you use the type of person you are to develop yourself as a coach? Even though there are specific kind of coaching practices, there are still different types of coaches and different ways that coaches will approach that coaching process. So think about for yourself, what are your core strengths? What are you good at? What are your assets? And how do you want to develop those or build on those in order to become a better coach? And that is that for all of the slides. So I'm going to stop with the screen sharing. And see, do we have any other questions, or?
Take one more look and see. No, I don't see any questions.
All right.
If anyone does have any questions, though, after we're finished, we could send them my way. I could send them to Michelle. Michelle can respond back to me and get back to you. We can do that. If you have any questions about anything in today's webinar PowerPoints, again, the slides will be on michellemmartin.com/WFD.
Yep.
That's right.
Yep.
And we'll also get you that link as well.
Yeah, and yeah, so we'll put the recording and all that. That should be up by tomorrow morning.
Mm-hmm. Last chance, anyone? Well, okay. We are, again, sorry about those technical difficulties that we got through it.
We got through it.
Persevered and we grew. So. And yeah, I think that some of the stuff that you talked about, Michelle, here is really, I think it's very interesting stuff, especially like the vision boards, journaling, just just the nature of being one with the individual that's looking for work and helping them through the process, not telling them what to do.
Yeah, I think that, there's stuff that
Hello?
because those are not always the things that work with. We're actually working with people, and so for a lot of people, we really need to be thinking about what are strategies that maybe are not as organizational or bureaucratic or whatever. Because in the end, we have to really touch on people's emotions, and a lot of that, the stuff that we talk about with coaching, really starts to help you, get to those emotions and those deeper concerns and issues.
Absolutely.
So.
All right. Well, again, we will be sending out evaluations. I encourage you to just people that were participating to send me a email just to verify your attendance. We could send out those evaluations to you, and hopefully get you a certificate, an e-certificate, when we get your completed evaluation. So that's how we'll work it. Any other questions, you can, of course, email me at cceritrainingschedule.com. I mean, at gmail.com. Sorry about that. Yes. Once again, that's cceritrainingschedule@gmail.com. All one word. So I guess we'll wrap it up and say
all right,
goodbye.
great. Thanks, Gerard.
Did a great job. Thank you again, Michelle. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.